introducing the program today. Welcome to the Framingham Public Library, and for everyone watching at home, welcome to, the light's on? The green light has to be on. There we go. Let's try again. Hi, everyone. I'm John Garrigan. I'm the teen librarian here at the library. I'm going to be introducing the program tonight, and welcome everyone here to the library and to everyone watching from home. We are going to be the program today is The Heist. Has anyone seen $500 million in art lying around Boston? With our presenter, Bob Ainsworth, a retired financial executive and the author of DUPED, a Harry Bartlett mystery, a fictionalized retelling of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Heist. He's going to review the details of the theft, the suspects, and the trail of paintings. He will also tell his own and others of his own and others' brush with the infamous crime. Tonight's event will run about an hour. We'll have time for a Q&A afterwards. At the end, we do have program evaluation forms in the back, so if you would like to, we would love to hear from you about what you thought of it and what we can do in the future. We've got a few other programs coming up over the next week, too. This Friday is our Friday night film. December 8th, we are showing the silent film classic of F.W. Murnau's The Last Laugh with live piano accompaniment from Richard Hughes. This Sunday, December 10th, the next concert in our Bob Dodd Sunday concert series will be at 3 o'clock with the Zelfira Trio. And then next Thursday, December 14th, will be the next program in our sustainability series, all about biking in Framingham. That'll be at 7 p.m. next Thursday, the 14th. And so now it is my pleasure to welcome Bob Ainsworth for the program.
Thanks a lot. Hi, so my name is Bob Ainsworth. I used to live in Framingham for quite a while off Beacon Street. I worked for IDG on Speen Street, the publisher, computer magazines and IDC Research. And so I was a financial guy. I was a CPA, controller, that sort of stuff. And so I was sort of looking for what to do when I retired because, there's only so much golf you can play. And I had back surgery, so I got a plate back here that sets off the alarms when I go through. And I always liked reading mysteries. Like when I was a kid, I read the old Perry Masons by Earl Stanley Gardner, and I was like 12 or 13, and the librarian ran to my dad and said, "My God, he's reading this adult stuff. You can't let him read this." And my dad was like, "No, he's fine." And so, I was just like reading that stuff. And when I got to retirement, I was thinking what I was going to do, and I thought maybe I'd give speeches about frauds because I taught accounting. And all my students loved my fraud stories. And I discovered a couple when I worked, but I didn't have enough content. It's not like I worked in the FBI or a fraud group or something. So I just didn't have enough content. So I started thinking about, well, maybe I could write something. And I, through a long process, came up with some characters. People I admired are my good guys. People who I really hated are my bad guys. So that sort of makes it easy. I have a visual. I know what they sounded like. I know why I hated them. And I decided to write everything sort of where I knew. So my books are set on Nantucket, Boston, and the North Shore, because my wife lived up there. So I wrote one book, I wrote them in the different order than they're published. But a friend of mine read one of them, and he said, "I really like this Uncle Louie character." And he was sort of a mob guy with his nose is this way, and he's a real guy. He was a friend of my wife's uncle. And he said, "I really like him. You got to put a book around him." So I tried to think of the biggest crime in Boston. As I was thinking, like the Da Vinci Code. Like, that's a massive subject, so it's easy to grasp. Well, the easiest thing in Boston is either the Brinks heist, which they solved, or this. So I researched this as much as I could. And so I came up with this story. And I have an ending in my book. The paintings are all found, and I'll tell you where. But I had to do a lot of research. I watched that Netflix thing by Mike Barnichel's kids. There's a great book by a guy named Steve Kirchin, who used to work for the Globe. And I just kept going down rabbit holes on the internet, sort of like you do a genealogy. I just kept looking and looking and came up with a story. So that's my book there. So what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to all relax and close your eyes. And I mean close your eyes, because some people sit and they keep looking at me, but I don't want you to do that. So I want you to close your eyes. So I want you to pretend that you're hovering over the city of Boston. Below you is a brown rectangle building with a huge skylight in the middle. It's facing the Fens in Boston. To your right is the Museum of Fine Arts. Past that is Northeastern. To your left is the Citgo sign at Kenmore Square and Fenway Park. In front of you is the Fens. After that is Sturrow Drive, Charles River, and then Cambridge. It's the end of March, 1990, sort of towards the end of winter. It's not very cold. To the left of this building is a road, Palace Road. There's some streetlights there, but they're amber colored. They don't shed a lot of light, so it's sort of dim. But on the left-hand side of the building that you're hovering over is a service entrance that sticks out about 5 feet. 150 feet down Palace Road, there's a car sitting there idling. 2 men are in it. It's 1 a.m. All of a sudden, the side door from that service entrance opens up. A flash of light comes out, and the door suddenly shuts. The men don't know what this is. They continue to sit there. 5 minutes later, all of a sudden, they hear people singing St. Patrick's Irish songs. It's 1 hour after the end of St. Patrick's Day. It's March 18th, 1990, 1:10 a.m. It's two couples. The girls are on the guy's shoulders. They're chicken fighting. They go down the road. They're a little bit drunk. They fall over. They see the men in the car. They see on their left shoulder patch, Boston police patch. They can see their pointed hats. They're like, oh my God, we got to get out of here. We're underage. We're going to get busted. They scamper away. The men continue to sit in the car. At 1:20, the driver puts the car in gear and slowly goes up towards the side entrance. They get out of the car. Both of them have on full Boston police uniforms. One man's a little taller than the other. They go up to the side entrance, push the button. Hey, let us in. We've heard there's a disturbance. Somebody inside pushes a button and they're let in. Now they're in a clear glass room. They flash their badges. Security guard punches another button and lets them in. The two men go in and say, hey, you, come out from behind the counter. That's where the security guard was seated. He comes out. They grab him, put him up against the wall. They pull out his wallet. Hey, we know your name. We know where you live. You tell anybody about this and you're in trouble. Where's the other guard, they ask him. He's out on his rounds. We'll call him. They give him his walkie-talkie. He calls. The other guard comes down. They slam him up against the wall, pull his wallet, threaten him. They take the two of them downstairs to the basement. They know exactly where they're going. They don't get lost. They take one of the guards at one end of the basement, the other at the other. They handcuff them, tape them, and leave them. It takes 20 minutes. These guys are not in a hurry. They go back upstairs to the second floor, go down the hall to the Dutch room. For the next 40 minutes, they go back and forth from the Dutch room to the short gallery, to the Dutch room, to the short gallery. Finally, at 2:40, they go back downstairs to the first floor where the security guards were. They leave a broken frame on the security director's desk. They pull the tape that shows all the activity in the museum. It takes them they take the video camera recording that showed them coming into the building. It takes them 2 trips to load their car. It's 2:45. They go down Palace Road towards the Fens, take a right, go around past the MFA, head to Sturrow Drive, and they're gone. And that's the robbery. You can open your eyes. So that's what happened. That's what we know. There was a lot more behind it, a lot more background, but that's sort of a good visual. So obviously you were looking over the Gardner Museum. You know, the Fens is there, everything you can, picture what it was. So Oh, I hate when this happens. All right, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. Uh-oh. Sorry. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna have to go back and forth, but I'll do it this way. So this is a picture of the aftermath. You can see that these guys had no concern for the art they were looking at. The stuff is on the floor, the frames are broken. This is the Dutch room I was talking about. This is where all the famous stuff was taken from. So I'm going to go through a little bit about Isabella. She's a really interesting woman, especially for the times. You know, this is the 1890s, early 1900s. She was doing things most women didn't do. It was just a sign of the times. And I'll talk about what was taken. There were 13 items taken, not all paintings. Some were sketches. There was a vase, and there was an eagle finial from Napoleon. There were some prior thefts, prior attempts to get into both the MFA and the Gardner. So we'll talk about those. And then we'll talk about who done it, because we know who did it. And we know sort of who planned some of it, but we don't know everything. So I'll talk about Isabella, how she started the museum, why she started it, where it's located, and why was it able to be robbed? Because you would think a world-class museum, people would not just be able to walk in, say, hey, let me in. They get in, and they disappear with 13 items. But they did. But there's a reason. And unfortunately, Isabella, her wishes are part of the reason. So I don't know if you've been there, but nothing in the museum can be moved, according to her will. The 4th floor used to be where she lived. And now it houses administrative offices and about 2,500 items. They can't take those down. They can use them for some, like short exhibits, but that's about it. So that's why the old frames are back up, because that's why it has to be. And I'll show you her will that says that it has to. So here's Isabella as a young girl. Like I said, she didn't like to have her photograph taken very often. So here's a famous painting of her that's in the museum, gorgeous painting. Right? Any of you who haven't gone to the garden, you have to go there. It's a great place. So here's another image of her, another painting. And that and this sketch are both done by this guy, Anders Zorn. Now let me see if I can get anything to work. Oh, I can. So this around here is supposed to be diamonds. Like that she had this little, because she was very wealthy. She had a very wealthy father and then a wealthy husband. And they both passed and left all the money to her. So that's what that's supposed to be up there. And that's a picture of her in her older age. So you can sort of see, you know, the artist, you know, wanted to please the patron. So they painted her looking one way, but she really didn't look that way. But that's okay. That's not really important to the story. So here's another image of her walking a lion in Boston. Now, I have looked everywhere to find where there was a zoo on Boylston Street, and I just can't find it. But, you know, the Globe says that it happened, so okay, fine. But, you know, there she is walking a lion. And this is, you know, so she would smoke cigarettes, play cards. Oh, my God. She drove her car very fast, played backgammon. And like she says down here, there's nobody like her in the country. She's a millionaire bohemian. She was eccentric, to say the least. But, you know, having a lot of money lets you do that. So I'll just sort of go through this. So she was born in 1840, very wealthy father from New York, married a wealthy guy from Boston who I think was in shipbuilding up in Gloucester. They had a child who unfortunately passed away. She had a miscarriage, and the couple decided with all their money, they would start traveling to sort of fill the void. So they would scour Europe with all their money, and her dad left her a pretty good hunk, 1.8 million. Then her husband died and left her money, but she continued working on the museum. This was her vision. This was what she wanted to leave for people. And so she kept going at it, even after everybody had passed, but she had the money. It opened up. It was free to get in originally, and she lived on the 4th floor. And then she died and gave 1.2 million to the museum. So that's important, the 1.2 million, because it's going to play into why it got robbed. So this is where she used to live. So this is on Beacon Street. So 151 is where they started, and she filled that place up with art. So then they bought that one, and she filled that one up with art. And then they bought that one and filled that up with art. So then it was like, well, we need a museum, right? We've got 3 buildings, and we're filling it up. And so this is right down near the public garden over that way. And there's a picture of the gardener. So for those of you, who know, the Gardner is not just a museum. The building itself is art. She took back columns, floors, ceilings, everything she could think of that would fill it. And that's how she built it. So the place is not just walls with paintings. It's much more than that. And that's the inside courtyard. And it's just stunning. So if you look here, so the 4th floor is up there. That's where she lived. The Dutch room, where everything got stolen, is back in here. This is the hallway they came down, and sort of on this end of this courtyard is the short gallery where the other stuff was stolen. Okay? But you can see, it's just beyond description. So this is where she got her idea. This is Venice. This is a hotel they used to stay at. And there's another building. And you can see this stuff looks exactly like what she put into her museum, into her building. She took whole things and just brought them back and put them in. It's just stunning. And when I told you there was a building with the skylight, so there's the skylight over that courtyard. Okay, so I had you picture where the Gardner is, but let's do it a little bit easier. So here's the Gardner here. Here's the Fens. Here's the MFA. Northeastern's here. Here's Fenway. Here's Kenmore Square. So I want you to remember just a couple of things. It's not like there's a quiz, but remember a couple of things. So that road where I said the cops were sitting in their car, that's Palace Road, and it goes one way this way. That's important. Palace Road, one way up that way. So here's another schematic of Boston. So the Gardner is up in the Fenway area. Ooh, South Boston. Who's Whitey Bulger? Anybody know Whitey Bulger? Yeah, okay. So Whitey Bulger sort of has a little play in this, plus I have a personal story that I'll tell you about with Whitey. I'm still alive. It's not like it's not that bad. So the other thing I want you to remember, so Palace Road, and I want you to remember this, TRC Auto Electric. It's in Dorchester, 1325 Dorchester Avenue. Just remember that, okay? And then there's another spot I want you to remember, which is the town of Revere, which is about 6 miles north, okay? So Palace Road, TRC Auto Electric, Revere. So this is what the Fenway looked like when she bought the land. It was really on the outskirts of Boston. It wasn't a nice looking area. It was a swamp, okay? I think this is called Muddy River, if I remember right, Muddy Creek. Okay, so that's what it looked like when she started, and then that, and that's what she created, right? So this is what it looks like now. This is all the new section where we were talking about they have the concert hall. This is Palace Road. This is the entrance. The side entrance I talked about is right over there. Okay, so why was this place able to be robbed? So Isabella placed everything in the museum exactly where she wanted it. And she gave them $1.2 million, but there's an important caveat. You can only apply the income. So of 1.2 million, if it's 5%, that's only $60,000. That's not a lot of money to run a museum. So they're sort of shortchanged, and the board of directors was not great at fundraising. So between her will and no fundraising, the place was sort of run on a shoestring. There was also this part, and I'll summarize it, but this basically says, if you sell anything in the museum or move it, everything gets sold, the money goes to Harvard, and you close the museum. So when I said they can't replace those paintings or pull stuff down, that's why. It violates her will. And the will is still intact. So if they go start taking things down, close the place, give the money to Harvard. So you can see they were sort of under some financial distress, and that led to things. So there was a video camera out, pointing outside to Palace Road, and there was one inside where the security guards is, no backup. One camera, no backup. That's bad. Okay, the guards were minimum wage, untrained. You'll see what they look like. You're going to laugh. There was no auto alarm. So normally, if you're a security guard, you go to a place and you put a thing in that said, I was here. Then you go to the next station, I put something, and you do that. Didn't happen. Okay, and there was no alarm. There was an alarm that went to the Boston police station, but remember I said they made the guard come out from behind his station? That's where the button was. They knew he would push it. So they made him, they knew what they were doing. This was not a couple of guys. So they made him come out, and that's why they shoved him up against the wall. So there's no record, there's no video, nobody got warned. So that's why these guys took 81 minutes to go through. They didn't care. They could have been there all night, for all anyone cared. The place was in horrible shape. There was plastic over the paintings to keep water from damaging them. There were rubber mats on the floor because there was no humidity or air conditioning control. It was just a mess. I had somebody in one of my sessions here, and she was there at the time, and she said, I'm being nice, that the place really was a wreck. Unfortunately. And Isabella didn't mean it that way, but between her will and the board, they just weren't getting any money, so they couldn't do anything. So let's go through what was taken. So you're going to recognize some of these. So there's this little baby that's worth $250 million, right? Vermeer. There's only, I think, 34 in the world, something like that. Some number like that, but there's not a lot. There's this little baby by, I don't know, Rembrandt. I guess he's pretty good, right? And then there's that one, and you could tell that's the cover. That's what I use for my cover for my book. So you got three. So this is what the Dutch room looked like before the theft. It's an older picture, it's black and white, but this is what it looked like. So there's the lady and gentleman in black over there. So here's just another picture. So there's the Sea of Galilee. This is the concert by Vermeer. On the back side of this, they were sort of back to back, is landscape with obelisk. So I went too fast. Lady and gentleman in black is there. You see this little thing here? It's a Chinese vase, a gu, or a ku. That was taken. It's kind of odd. Like, why would you take a Vermeer and take a vase to put flowers in? But there's a reason. At least I think there is. And here's what it looked like afterwards. I'll just let you look at it. It's just horrible. They just took things down, broke them apart. They didn't care. This here is the tapestry room. They went in there once or twice, but didn't take anything. And this is the Dutch room. Here's the courtyard here. So those are three, so there are 13. So there's 10 other items that were taken. So there's a Rembrandt, the landscape, that was the one on the back. There's something called Chez Tortoni, which is a painting of a man in a cafe. That one's kind of important. We'll get to that. I know I'm asking you to remember a few things, but remember that one. And there were 5 sketches of jockeys. Now, when I say sketches, it's just like a little thing, pencil, paper, like nothing fabulous, but they were taken. And then the Chinese vase, and an eagle. So the eagle is called a finial. It sat on the top of a staff for Napoleon. That's where and it had a flag next to it, and that's how everyone could tell where he was on the battle, because he was surrounded by his first Imperial Guard, and they held this thing up, and they're like, oh, there's Napoleon, because he was short, so they couldn't see him. Yes, that's what she paid, $141,000. Pick a number. $500,000, $500 million, $1 billion, priceless stuff. I mean, maybe not the Chinese vase, but the other stuff, certainly. So this is the short gallery, short room. So the finial was back in here. So this was his flag, Napoleon's flag, and there's a staff behind here, and on the top of that staff is the finial. Okay? And the sketches were behind one of these boards. Just not tacked there, but just like tacked there. So somehow they went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these boards to get to these 5 in the back. It's very odd. But we'll get to that too. So that's the finial. See the one for Napoleon, there's the flag I was telling you about. And this is just what it looks like. So I have a bunch of stories. So this is a really interesting story. So 2 years ago, this guy, Paul Calantropo, retired. He was a jeweler on Washington Street at the time. And he said a couple of months after the theft, this guy, Bobby Donati, came in and said, hey, I have this eagle. You want to buy it? And you can see what he said. Jesus, Bobby, why didn't you steal the Mona Lisa? Everybody knows what was stolen. How are you going to fence this stuff? Nobody wanted to touch it. So he turned him away, and that's the only sighting of anything from the theft. That one where this guy Donati tried to go in and get some money for this thing. In my book, I have the eagle being bought by somebody from Boston College, because that's where I went, and we're the Eagles. So you got to be imaginative when you write this stuff. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Somebody tried to pull off a fake one, and I'll get to that, but that's the only thing that's been seen. So this is the Chez Tortoni. These are a couple of the sketches. Here we go. This is the Chez Tortoni by Manet, and this is the obelisk by Flink. They thought it was a Rembrandt, but it wasn't. And these are the sketches. So again, I'm not denigrating Degas, and they're nice sketches, but they're just sketches, right? 3 of them are jockeys. Some of them are just, it's just like stuff. Yeah, kind of like. So, like I said, when I was researching for my book, you go down rabbit holes. If any of you do genealogy, you just find some thread and you go down until God knows where you are. And I was going through the internet and I found this. And this is the 1984 guidebook to the gardener. So here's one of the pages from the gardener guidebook. And it describes the Dutch room, right? That's where everything was taken. Look at what's listed. The storm in the Sea of Galilee and a coup. The things that were taken are listed on this page. I know. Look what's listed there. The obelisk. The things that were listed in the guidebook are what was taken. Here's the page that describes the short gallery. Look at what's listed. 5 Degas sketches, 3 of jockeys. So it's almost like somebody had the guidebook and they tore it up and said, okay, you go to this room and you take this stuff and you go get this stuff. It's like sending your husband down to Hannaford for your shopping. It's just they had a list. They took the stuff on the list. Who knows if this is true, but this is the best explanation I've seen for why this stuff was taken. So the Chez Tortoni, that's what it looks like. That's the spot where it's supposed to be. It's the only item listed in that guidebook for that room. So you got like 3, 4 things. It's the only thing listed, and that's what got taken. All right, so what wasn't taken? Oh, a Rembrandt, that's still there. Go ahead. Yes. It was screwed in. It was too much work. Yeah. They didn't take this. A Rubens? Are you kidding me? They take sketches and they vase and they don't take this. And they didn't take that, which is just, oh my Lord. You know, those are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. There was an exhibit of 4 of those at, I think, at the Gardner, and it's just stunning. They're 6 by 7. They were commissioned by the King of Spain. Just unbelievable. So here's the Rembrandt, the sketch that wasn't taken. So we're in the Dutch room. This is the hallway down to the short gallery. Over here is the center courtyard. So you go down here and hook a right, and that's where you get to the short gallery. Okay. So now we're going to get into some good fun stuff. So I did the first presentation. Oh, so the reason I did this presentation is I wrote that book about Uncle Louis, and the friend of mine who asked me to write the book called the Gardner, Massachusetts Historical Museum and booked me to give a presentation and didn't tell me. He said, you have a date in 3 weeks to do a presentation. You better put one together. So I did. So that's this. Somebody in the audience that night came up to me afterwards and he said, I was the head of security at the Gardner on that day. The FBI came in and said, we have a tip, the Gardner's going to get boosted. This was a decade before the actual theft. And he was in that meeting. So it was really cool. Like the people who show up at these things, I'll tell you the other connections, but there's a lot like that. But there was no break-in. They took some measures. Things went ahead. 2 months before the theft, right? The theft was March 18th, 1990. January 15th, 1990. The back of the MFA, which faces the Fens, right? The front with the Indian is on the Huntington Avenue side. So 2 guys dressed as cops go up to the back of the MFA. Hey, we got to get in. We hear there's a disturbance. The security guard said, I can't let you in. That's against policy. I have to go get my boss. So he leaves. Now, you know the MFA, it's like a gigantic thing. It takes him about a year to find his boss. He gets back, the guys are gone. But there were 2 cops trying to get into the MFA 2 months before the theft. Oh, and by the way, the MFA didn't tell a soul. They didn't tell the Boston cops. They didn't tell the Gardner. They told nobody. Would have been nice to share. 2 weeks before the theft, 2 men on Palace Road are beating up another guy. He breaks free. He runs to the side entrance. Let me in, I'm getting beat up. I can't let you in. It's against policy. Oh, okay. He walks away, gets in the car with 2 guys and drives away. 2 weeks before, tried to fake their way in. The theft was on March 18th. March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, at about 1 a.m., at least 3 men are let into the Gardner the night before. And we know this because the FBI has the tape. Remember I said there was a video that the thieves took? Well, they didn't take the one from the night before because, who cared? So they took this, and the FBI released the tape. So if you go onto fbi.gov and look, you can see this. It's really cool. Go right ahead. Now, I warn you, if you watch this, you have to turn off all the lights because it's really dark and it's really hard to see what's going on. But I have a few screenshots, and I'll show you what goes on. So you all set? Okay, great. So here's the room. Remember I said the guys came in. There was a security guard behind a counter. So here's the counter. right here. This is an older security guard. This is the night before. He was not on the night of the theft, so he had nothing to do with it. But you can see it's March 17th, 47, so, you know, a little before 1 o'clock a.m. Here's another picture. So here's the other guard. He's behind the counter. They've got a phone. That buzzer that went to the cops is like right there. The buzzer to the door is right there. His name is Richard Abath, so I have to tell you this quick story. So the last time I did this, I referred to him as Richie, just because I felt like it. And I get an email from somebody who was in the audience. She said, "Why did you call him Richie?" She's like, she must know something. So I sent back, I said, "I just made it up, but why do you ask?" She said, "Her best friend is friends with him, and he goes by Rick. So don't call him Richie." So I have to call him Rick from now on. But it's just interesting who shows up in these things, the connections I get. So anyway, I'll go by Richard. And that's him. So 3/17, 1990, 48:10. So not too, a minute later. This is Palace Road the car's going the wrong way. The building is here. The car's going this way. Okay? A couple of seconds later, the older guard leaves. The other guard is still sitting here. A couple of seconds later, here's the car. It's turned around. It's now facing the fence. Okay, it went down Palace Road, pulled a U-ey. Now it's sitting right opposite the side entrance. And you can't see it, but there's a figure there. So somebody parked the car, turned off the lights, turned off the ignition, and now they're walking towards the museum, to the side entrance. And here's the security guard, 48:58, 49:15. He's hitting the buzzer to let somebody in. He's not supposed to let anybody in, but he is. And the guy behind the desk is that Richard Abath. 49:25, this is somebody walking away, right? You can see sort of his step. And here's the car, right? Lights are out. He's going that way. Turns on the car, but this is another person. Where did he come from? I'm telling you, the inside lights of the car did not go on, so he couldn't have been sitting in the car. So where did he come from? Right? You can't tell, but he's there. So somebody's sitting here, and somebody's there going in. And that's 49:39, 49:48. Here's Richard Abath back here. This guy is now inside. So he's gotten in. Push the button, let him in, no problem. 53:00, here's the guy walking through. That is not the older guy. And that is not Richard Abath, because Abath has his long, bless you, his long strangly hair. This is somebody else. 53:10, the car lights are on. Here's somebody else again, right? So this guy's gone in, but 10 seconds later, somebody's out here and somebody's sitting in the car. It's like they're having a party or something. It's like, I don't know. The car drives away. The inside lights of that car do not go on. This person, I call it a guy, this guy because I don't know, this guy did not get in that car because the inside lights didn't go on. So we've got like 3 people. So the theory is, here's the guy who went in, here's his picture. One of the theories is that it was Larry O'Brien. He was the assistant director of security, and that he had to go in to get his keys or something. He left something in there. But, just my visual, this guy does not look like this guy. The coat's different, the hair looks different. This guy looks a little huskier. This guy's pretty gaunt. Just doesn't look to me like the same guy. So I don't think that's what it was. All right, so we're going to go through sort of quick what happened at the theft. So the partiers are the kids that I was telling you about, playing chicken, walking down, singing songs. So here's who they were, and there's no secret, but they didn't really see much. So picture it like you guys are in the car, and I'm coming this way. All I can see is like your shoulder. I can't see your face. So they didn't get a good look. They saw the car, and they saw a shoulder patch, but that's it. They didn't really see faces. They gave their statements. The cops were like, there's a bunch of drunk college kids, da-da-da. Let them go. They didn't know much. And they didn't. So that's what an 88 red Dodge Daytona hatchback looks like. So I don't know. All I know is this is not a Cadillac. This is not a Corvette Stingray. This is not a minivan. This is not a station wagon. They sort of look alike. I have no idea if it is, but they look pretty close. The security guards. So this is Richard. So he was in a band, Uriah. They were in Alston Brighton. They would give concerts, in the basement for like $5. Come in, drink all you can, and listen to the band. So this is Richie and his group. And the other guard, so the second guard, the one who came down, was a guy named Randy Hested. He was not supposed to be on that night. He was a last-minute call-in. He had nothing to do with anything. He was just the second guard. Totally unconnected to anything. He just was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I looked for his picture. I couldn't find it. So here's just a summary of the theft that I told you about. Oop, I don't know how to go back. But, it's basically they came in, they tied the guards up, they spent an hour going around, came down, took the stuff. All right. So the robbery took place, like I said, from 1:24 to 2:45. This was not a rush job. These guys knew they had time because nobody was going to set an alarm. The theft was discovered at 7 a.m. when the next shift came on. They didn't know if they were going to find the robbers, the dead security guards. They didn't know anything. So they went in very cautious because they didn't know what they were going to find. They just knew when they went in, the guards weren't where they're supposed to be. So then they went searching around and found them in the basement. So this is sort of a schematic. So the Dutch room is up here. Here's Palace Road. Here's the front. Here's the side entrance over here. The short gallery is here. And remember I said that Chez Tortoni was in the blue room? Blue room's on the first floor. The other two were on the second floor. So that sort of makes a difference. Here's the side entrance. This is Palace Road. The cops are parked the wrong way. There's Palace Road going that way. And that's the side entrance 2 weeks ago when I drove by and took a picture. Not very intimidating. This used to be her side entrance, her personal entrance. So she went in there and then she lived on the 4th floor. So that's what it used to be. You can't get out that way anymore. It's blocked off. I think there's only stairs. I don't know, but I think there's only stairs. So here's something interesting. So I said this Richard Abath. So at 12:27, he does his rounds, and he goes into this blue room where that Chez Tortoni is. So that's 12:27. 12:53, he goes back and does it again. He's doing his rounds. Good security guard. At 1:04, remember I said all of a sudden the side door opens, the light comes on, and then it closes? That was him. He said he was testing the security system. Maybe he was. But he's the one who opened the door and then shut it. Oh, the two fake cops never went into that blue room. The only one who went into that blue room was Richard Abath. Nobody else went in there. And the reason they know is they had security lighting around the museum so they could tell when somebody passed it, like a diode or something, whatever it was, but it would reflect at somebody. So they know nobody else went in there. So how did the painting disappear is a good question. So this, I'll just go sort of quick, but they go in, they tie him up, they get Hestat, they take him to the basement, they handcuff him, they go back to the Dutch room, and then they just sort of go back and forth from the Dutch room to the short room, to the Dutch room, to the short room. And then there's a gap. 15 minutes, no movement registered. Like, were they playing cards? Did they have to go to the bathroom? Were they just sitting on the floor admiring what they were doing? But there was no movement, 0. Then, all of a sudden, movement again. They're floating around. And then, no movement again. Don't know what happened. They tested all the sensors. They all worked. It's not like there was a malfunction. So then they go downstairs, in and out 2 times. And then 2:46, Gone Baby Gone, which is a great movie. It's directed by Ben Affleck with his brother in it. Really good movie. So here's just another way to sort of look at it. So, here's the side entrance. They come in. There's the guard. They take them down the basement, come back up, hang around here, come down here, hang around here, come back, da-da-da. They went into the tapestry room once, I think. Came back out, back downstairs. The car is parked here, 2 times in and out Palace Road, and they're done. So here's the gaps. So here's when they're working. Here's a gap. There's the second gap. So when I said they knew where everybody was, the one thing that fake cops didn't know was that there were 2 tapes registering where everybody was. They knew of one, they didn't know of the second. So this is the actual tape of people moving around. Someone is in the Dutch room, investigate immediately. Really? No kidding. Things are getting robbed. But you can see it's just sort of someone's in the Dutch room, someone's in the Dutch. So there was something working, but they left this tape, which was very nice of them. Okay, so there's Richie in the basement when they found him in the morning. So sort of the question is, if you look at this, he doesn't look like he's been in distress for 7 hours, right? He looks sort of comfortable, not to be indelicate, but he was tied up for 7 hours. Did he have to go to the bathroom, But he doesn't look like he's totally disarmed. Did he actually go up and talk and help them? And then at the end, when they were going to leave him, because they went down to the basement a second time, did they tie him up then? Hard to say. Then they separated the 2 guards, so they never saw each other while this was going on. One was way down there. The other, Rich, was way down there. Okay, so what do we know about the thieves? Well, we know a bunch of people went in the night before. We know there's a red Dodge Daytona. We know the timeline. But the security guards, Abath and the other guy, Hested, saw the 2 thieves. So we should have sketches. There's the sketches. So this is one guy. They did it, one with a mustache, one without. And this is the second guy, mustache, not without, without. Here's their descriptions. So they're pretty close to being the same, except look, so here, thief number 1, Abath says he had gold square glasses. The other guy's like, glasses? What glasses? Now, to be fair, they've been tied up. They're scared. People remember different things. Eyewitness accounts are notoriously unreliable. So, okay, fine. Over here, he says, Hested had a fake mustache. Here he says none. Hested said he thought the one guy had chubby cheeks. Hested said he thought one guy had a Boston accent. Those are sort of subjective. Accent, no accent. Okay, chubby cheeks, no chubby. So now the question becomes, who done it? Was it Richard Abath? Did he orchestrate this whole thing? Because it's always, go for the inside guy. Somebody did it there. Was it like a Pierce Brosnan, sort of famous international art thief going around the world? Did he pull this off? Was it the mafia? Which one? Was it the Patriarchas down in Providence? Was it the Angelos in North End? Was it Whitey Bulger in South Boston? Who pulled it off? Or was it just a couple of morons, jamokes, who didn't know any better? Well, we're going to find out. So here's Richie now. He's had no sign of wealth. He lives up in, I forget if it's in Vermont or New Hampshire, but he lives, around. And that's where he was tied up. Clearly, he thinks that hair ringlet is a good look for him. But he passed out lie detector tests, and he passed them all. So he's fine. He's just, wrong guy, wrong place, wrong time. So there's another guy named Brian McDevitt, and he had pulled off a robbery at the Vanderbilt estate, and he dressed in a uniform, a FedEx uniform, but he dressed in a uniform. He got caught. He lived on Beacon Hill the day of the theft. However, he doesn't look anything like either of those guys. They would have noticed a beard, right? Maybe the other stuff not so much, but they would have noticed the beard. So he didn't do it, and he told his girlfriend that somebody paid him to do it, and then he had to leave to LA to become a screenwriter, which was just, I think, his way of dumping his girlfriend. It's like, oh, I gotta leave town because I'm gonna get arrested. He just left. So he didn't do it. Then there's this guy. He's a pretty interesting guy. He was a genius IQ, member of a rock band. His dad was his chief of police of a town on the South Shore. He stole paintings with that Bobby Donati. Remember the eagle? He worked with Donati. He stole stuff from an estate. He stole a Rembrandt from the Boston MFA. He gave it back so he wouldn't go to jail. He went in, grabbed it, and ran out the front door. But that was in the early 70s. That was him later in life. He cased the Gardner with Donati. He has said that. This is like part of his. But, and he's friends with, you'll meet him. But he was in jail that night. So he clearly didn't do it, but he had the brains to do it, and he cased the place, and he knew how to get in there. Then there's this fella, David Houghton. Yeah, I know. So he dated Miles Connor's sister. He visited Connor in prison on how to rob the Gardner. He held his art. Problem is he weighed 350 pounds. So the guards may have been, frightened, but 350 pounds is pretty large, and nobody said the cops were 350. But he died pretty soon after the theft. Then there's this guy, Louis Royce. Remember that FBI thing in 1981? He was the one who went to the FBI and tipped them off. He said he had heard underground that there was going to be a theft. So he was a informant for the FBI. But he was an art thief. Now, interesting, he slept in the Gardner as a kid. He came from a really bad home. And when he wanted to get away from his father mostly, he would go into the Gardner at like 3 in the afternoon, sneak up to the 4th floor, hide under a table, sleep there overnight, get up in the morning, use the bathrooms, clean himself up, and then go out for the day. So he knew the museum inside and out. He cased the Gardner. He owned a place that fenced stolen art. He robbed a house with, this a lot of art stuff with him. So, remember I said it could have just been a couple of guys? Those are the sketches. What do you think? They look reasonably close to me, right? So if we have pictures, we must know names. So that's George Jamaica Plain Reisfelder. And that's Lenny the Mutt DiMuzio. These are their names. I don't make this stuff up. Okay? So to me, that looks pretty close to what happened. That looks pretty close to what those guys are. And the FBI has sort of said those were the two who went in. He's the taller one. He's the shorter one. So here's George smiling as he goes off to jail. There. Guess what kind of car he owned? Okay? And he worked, remember I said, remember TRC Auto Electric? See where he worked. And somebody's sister said they saw Shea Tortoni, the painting, on his bedroom wall. He died of a coke overdose a year after the theft. His body was found by a guy named Carmelo Merlino. We're going to get to Carmelo. So here's Lenny the Mutt. He worked at TRC Auto Electric. He died a year after the theft, found in the trunk of his car, beaten to death. He was killed by a guy named David, allegedly by David Turner, and David Turner worked at, thank you very much, audience participation. So he's dead. So the two guys who went in are dead a year after the thing. Okay? So here's David Turner. So there's some thought that these are the chubby cheeks, and somebody also described him as having slanty eyes. I'm not being disparaging, and so maybe, his eyes are a little, but thing was, he was in Florida the day of the theft, so he didn't do it. But he worked at TRC Auto Electric. So here's TRC today. I just did a Google Street and took a screenshot, so that's where it is. It's still active. It was owned by Carmelo Merlino. Carmelo ran a cocaine ring for the Patriarchas out of Providence. And what did George Reisfelder die of? A cocaine overdose. So, and his body was found by the guy who owned this. So let's meet Carmelo. I'm sure any woman would be glad to bring him home to say, here's who I'm marrying, Dad. Right? So he was the head of the cocaine ring. He owned that place. He got thrown in jail for robbing a armored car. He exchanged a painting for jail time. So that guy Miles Connor did it. He took one out of the MFA and exchanged it. And this guy did too. So if you're looking for a motive, saying that you're going to give back something you stole to get somebody out of jail isn't a bad way. And we'll get to that in a second. He was also caught on a wire talking about the theft. He died a little while ago. So here's everybody who worked at TRC. George, Lenny, Bobby, David Turner, David Houghton, Tony Romano, and Carmelo, who owned it. All at TRC Auto Electric. So if we know who did it, the two guys, so who could have planned this thing? So there's Whitey, right? You all know Whitey, South Boston, so I have to tell you my story. So I was in the hospital for a heart thing, and I'm fine. But anyway, I had a roommate, and he and I sort of got on. We talked a lot. And so he's like, so what do you do? I said, I'm writing a book now. I'm writing this thing on the Gardner theft. He starts laughing at me, laughing. I'm like, why are you laughing at me? He says, I can't tell you. I have to kill you. He did. He said, I have to kill you. So, but he was sort of joking, sort of. So this went on for 3 days, and the last day I'm going to leave. I go around the tent. I said, his name's John. I said, John, you got to tell me why you're laughing at me. He said, okay, well, I started out as a bouncer, then I, became a bartender, then a cook, then a partial owner, then a real owner, and at the end, he said, I owned a restaurant with Whitey Bulger, a legit restaurant, not a hangout for mob guys, but a legit restaurant. And he looks at me and he goes, I'm telling you, Whitey did the Gardner. Maybe, I don't know, but he scared the hell out of me. So that's my brush with Whitey Bulger. Do any of you remember the Valhalla? Guns from Gloucester across the Atlantic to the IRA. They get caught over there, they come back, everybody on the boat gets arrested. You know who gave them the guns to put on that boat? Whitey. And another guy, Michael O'Connor, I think it was Michael O'Connor from Charlestown. Those two provided the guns. So the theory is Whitey did the theft to get the paintings to give to the IRA so they could sell the paintings to get guns to shoot the British. Kind of far-fetched, but okay. Why not? So then there's this guy, Bobby Donati. So he cased the place with the Gardner. He stole that. He worked at TRC. He was a driver for a guy named Vinny the Animal Ferrara, who was one of the underbosses. So when Raymond Patriarca died, his son took over. He was kind of a weak guy. So there was a big fight, a crime war about who was going to take over. And Vinny Ferrara was one of the guys. So I don't know if you've seen, but this is how I had to keep track of all the mob guys, because I just couldn't keep track of them. They're like there's just like too many of them, and they're all you can see it later, but it's just, that's the only way I could do it. The night before the theft, he was in a bar in Revere with 2 full Boston police uniforms in a paper bag, and he was showing them around the night before. It's hard to get police uniforms. Those stores are regulated. They have to keep track of everything. You just don't find those like at a Goodwill store, okay? So he had 2 uniforms. So if you sort of think about it, he had the uniforms. He gave them to these 2 guys, gave them a couple of grand. They went in, they stole the stuff, gave it to him. They're bragging about, oh, we did this great robbery. People want to find the paintings. They killed the 2 guys who went in. Pretty reasonable explanation. Bobby is the one who went to that jeweler and tried to sell the eagle. Unfortunately, a year or so after the theft, he was bludgeoned to death and almost decapitated. A friend of mine who reads my books is Italian and comes from Revere. And he's like, I have a friend in the mafia. Do you want to talk to him? Yeah, absolutely. So we went to Revere, spent an afternoon with this guy, got great stories. He showed me where Donati lived. He showed me where his body was found. He showed me where all the mafia guys lived. It was a great afternoon, great stories. So writing books can be fun. So where'd the stuff go? So there's this guy named Bobby Garenti, and he hung out at TRC. He was a father figure to David Turner. His widow said he gave some of the paintings to another guy named Bobby Gentile, who we'll get to. And some other mobster said this guy told him the stuff was in Orlando, Florida. He's dead. There's Bobby Gentile. He was the recipient of those paintings. When I went to Gardner, Massachusetts to give this presentation the first time, the director there told me he got a phone call, anonymous phone call, said, my neighbor across the street has all the Gardner paintings. He lives in Middleton, Connecticut, come down. Well, he had called the wrong museum, right? He'd called Gardner, Mass, instead of Isabella. But the guy calls the FBI. The FBI comes screaming out, grabs the tape. The next day, they did this, right? This was all over the news. And he had a shed, and below the shed, they found a false floor, and they found a Boston Herald newspaper article about the theft, and they found a list of the paintings with what you could sell them for on the street. No paintings, but a list. So maybe he had them afterwards. He's also passed away. So there's this guy, William Youngworth, and I mentioned him before. You know, he stole Rembrandts with Miles Connor. He had an art place. He was convicted a bunch of times. He had an antique store that sold stolen art. That's the place. Now, he tried to called a Boston Herald reporter and said, I have one of the paintings. So the guy found them, and he scraped the oil off, and they had it tested. And the oil painting was the right time period, but not the right paintings. So he tried to scam to get the reward money, but that didn't work. Oh, Joseph Murray. He was the other guy who provided the guns. All right, so then there's this guy, Jimmy, Irish Jim. So he went around bragging that he had two of the paintings. Talk about, like, not being smart. So he's a friend with Bobby Guarente, and they're up in Maine. And Bobby Guarente says, hey, let's go down to Revere. We'll go to the movies together. So they drive 2 cars down to Revere. They park. Jimmy goes to his house, and he gets 2 shotgun blasts to the back of his head from his friend Bobby Guarente. And so there's where he lived, and there was this door, and they unscrewed this light ahead of time. So somebody unscrewed the light before they even got there, and then he got blown away. Oh yeah, no, this is serious stuff. And there's just some other stuff about other gangsters. So this is what it looks like now, right? There's the frames. There's the lady. That's where that used to be. It's where that used to be. Here's now. So there's the Storm of the Sea. Right here is the Japanese ku or gu, the vase. Here's the Vermeer. The obelisk is back there. So where's the stuff? Well, it could be in Revere with Bobby Donati, right? He got the stuff. He hid it somewhere. He gets killed. He never tells anybody. The stuff is in Revere. It's in a basement, an attic, a shed, a floor, or who knows where. So Revere is a good spot to look. Could be up in Maine with the guy Bobby Guarente. It could have been in Connecticut at one time with that guy Gentile. There was another mobster connected with this in Philadelphia. Or it could be down in Orlando, although they dug up that house and it was a slab, and they dug up the whole slab and there was nothing there. But those are sort of good places to look. So here's my guess. Donati paid those 2 guys. He got the stuff. The guys were killed. Donati hid them. And the items are somewhere in Revere. So I wrote, like I said, this all started with I wrote a book. So I had to come up with an ending, right? So like I said, I had an Uncle Louis who was an art retrieval expert. So there's my book. Da-da-da. Great Christmas present. Please buy them in the back. This is my effort at marketing. I was an accountant, so this is the best I can do. So here's my Uncle Louis. So my wife lived in Swampscott when she was growing up, and we met in Boston College, so I must have gone by this place 1,000 times. It's on Revere Beach Parkway. And when I wanted to find a place where I said the paintings were, I said they're in this thing called Doc Kagan's Auto Clinic, and they have a picture of him as a doctor. It's hysterical. But I said the paintings are here in the oil pit down below where they would change the oil. So that's my ending. It's not true. So it's getting, I don't want to keep you guys too long. So there's 2 other books. This one's set on Nantucket. My character, Harry Bartlett's an accountant like me. His friend gets killed, and he tries to find where all the guy's money went, and his friend was running all sorts of frauds. Scammed was, although it came out last, it's the first one, so it's sort of Stepford Wives. I call them doppel-fraudsters, and these two women look alike, and they steal money from people fraudulently. So that one's set on the North Shore of Boston. The next one I'm doing is about Charles Ponzi, so it's my character's grandparents. They lose all their money to Charles Ponzi in Boston, 1920. So I did all these covers myself. I mean, I'm not an artist, but I don't think they're horrible. That's coming out this year. So Master Thieves by Steve Kirchin, great book, Boston Globe Pulitzer Prize winner, worked on the church case. This is a robbery by the Barnacle Kids. I'm on Facebook. There's things. This PowerPoint is on my site. These are all the places I'm going. I'm going to Las Vegas. No, not really. And that's the end. Thank you very much. So do any of you have questions? Or are any of you connected with the Gardner theft? Because it seems somebody in the audience is always connected actually with the theft. But do you have any questions or not? Okay.
So the Rembrandt that wasn't stolen because it was
Right.
against the law, was that in the book? Is that one of the ones?
No,
No, it wasn't. Okay.
not everyone was listed,
Okay.
but a couple of them were.
Someone connected was just released from jail. They spent 30 years on a murder.
David Turner.
That was David Turner.
Yeah.
Has he said anything since?
No, and he was in Florida when it happened, so not likely. I mean, the other two guys sort of matched the descriptions, those sketches pretty well. Well, that's not just me. I mean, the FBI has put this out. This is out there on the internet. That's pretty much who they say did it. Yeah. Yeah, everything you hear is like from the books or the thing or that I found. I'm not a historian, but it seems pretty reasonable to me. But yeah, no, this is sort of out there. If you look up Gardner, who did it? No. Well, I think it's sort of like Antiques. What was it? What's the show on PBS where they fix up houses? Well, that or where they Yankee? What's the home building, home fixing thing? This old house. Somebody will go into a place, they'll tear down a wall, and it's going to be in the wall, it's going to be in a basement, it's an attic, a shed. You hope it's there, but you don't know. You don't know. And Revere just seems reasonable because that's where Donati came from. I don't think George, Reisfelder or Lenny the Mutt, I don't think they kept them. I think they just got paid to do the job, and then they handed them over. They didn't care. So to me, that's, keep it simple. Stole it. Bobby had the uniforms. He took the paintings, hid them, got killed. So pretty simple.
So how did they get around? Didn't they used to have a greenhouse on the side of Isabella Stewart Gardner, and now the greenhouse?
Greenhouse is on the other side. The Palace Road side is where the service entrance is.
No, but now the greenhouse is no longer there.
Right.
Like in, I forgot where, like Roxbury or something.
Oh, okay.
And I was wondering how they got around the whale.
They didn't move any of the art pieces. Her will was, I think, inside the four walls. But you absolutely have to go if you haven't been. It's just a fantastic place to see. It really is gorgeous. Okay.
Because didn't it originally have like no electricity, and then they had to upgrade the electricity? I think I remember hearing that.
Could be.
Yeah.
I mean, they had to have electricity in the beginning. I mean, it was 1900. They had electricity. So, it wasn't lit by candles.